Jazakumullah khair for that warm opening. You weren't supposed to tell on me though. Assalamu alaikum. I want to actually begin where our sister left off when she said for us to start off with our intention, right? As our beloved Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam reminded us that every action is by its intention and you will be dealt with according to what you intended. So we want to jam-pack this room, jam-pack our hearts, jam-pack this moment with as much barakah as we can so that we leave here as we know that whatever we put into it, inshallah, bi-idhnillah, that's what we'll walk out with. That actions, if you ever read a book, the Book of Assistance, it's talked about how a moment is not necessarily by the actions, but by the intentions that are righteous intentions, by niyyah salihah in that moment, that Allah would give us much greater than what even we did here, inshallah, bi niyyah salihah. So we're here by the intention. I'm going to call them out. The seed of intention is in the heart. And you can, but it's an excellent reminder to do it on the tongue. As I call them out, grab them, take them, place them in your heart, remind them to yourself, and expand on them. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We're here by the intention to expose ourselves to the mercy of Allah, to expose ourselves to His kindness and His generosity. We're here by the intention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will transform our souls by the light of the Quran and by the remembrance of the beloved Messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wassalam. We're here by the intention that we can be amongst those that Allah is pleased with, that He would look upon us with His nadar of rida. We're here by the intention to establish this deen, this beautiful deen of Islam inside our lives, our families, our communities, and inside this world. We're here by the intention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would number us amongst those that He says were amongst those who follow the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, who obeyed the commandment to seek knowledge, who obeyed the commandment to change that which was inside of ourselves. We're here by the intention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would number us amongst the salihin wa salihat, that Allah ta'ala would number us amongst the qanitin wa qanitat, that Allah ta'ala would make this moment a means by which He saved us from the torment of the grave and the punishment of the hellfire even for the blink of an eye. Oh Allah, by this moment make this a means by which You allow us to enter into Jannatul Firdaus al-A'la wa Nabi Allah Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam wa Fatima Zahra. Sa'alukna ameen. You guys sleeping this morning. Right, Bismillah. So, the title of this is Be a Change Maker, right? I feel like there's a portion of it I'm missing. Is there? Be a change maker. When I think about being a change maker, and I, started to prepare for this talk, I said, subhanAllah, this, when I think about MWA and all that they're doing, I'm like, that's exactly, they're a change maker, mashallah. Even the concept of having something that is going to be more geared towards women or developing this track, subhanallah, this inside of the ICNA Convention, that's a portion of, that's already making change. But the first thing is that what I like about this title is that when it says to be a change maker, that's very different, right? Then I'm just going to make change. But that I have to be that change. That I have to embody that change. That I have to be the difference that I want to see in the world. So what does that require from me? What does it take in order for me to embody that? Well, then we're going to get to that in a minute. The first thing we have to know when we're saying I'm going to be a change from what? Right? Change from what? That's what we have to begin to look at and talk about. Last night when I gave the lecture, how many of you were there? Oh, mashallah, okay. Allah bless you. I gave a list, basically, of some challenges that we've seen in 2018. And in 2018, by itself, I just want to give that list really quickly again. That, of course, we saw the war in Yemen escalate. The numbers continue to rise. It is now, as we talked about, one of the greatest humanitarian crises ever. We've seen a rise in the opioid epidemic, a rise in drug abuse. We've seen the situation with the Syrian refugee crisis continue to expand. Now, as those families, many of them even outside of Syria, have now struggled to actually find placement, to find housing. Many of them are homeless, have fallen into deep crime. I've seen women fall into prostitution, some of these Syrian refugees, in order to find a way to take care of themselves and their families. We look at the rise of suicide from being something that was distant from us, that now it is actually the number 2 cause of death between the ages of 15 and 34. I find that just mind-boggling. And when I looked at the statistics as it related to the Muslims, there was only a difference between about 1 and 2%. Then, of course, we saw this year a rise in addressing head-on the issues of spiritual abuse and the Me Too movement. And on top of that, not just the Me Too, but Mosque Me Too. Allah help. Then, of course, we saw number 45 decide that Jerusalem would be the capital, that Tel Aviv would be the capital of Jerusalem. Then only taking what we have actually are about somewhere close to 800 million refugees, that he has now said that he would only accept 45,000. 45,000 of them would only be acknowledged as having the right to return, and the rest of them will be displaced, pretty much until either there's another policy or for the rest of their lives. We've seen the situation with the Rohingya Muslims and how that has just exacerbated into a worse and worse state, and the situation that's also in China. We've seen mass incarceration. We've begun to have to address the immigration at our own boundaries. We see women fighting for space, just fighting for space inside the masjid. We hear women talking about the rise in homelessness. For in DC alone, where I'm from, homelessness has increased by 315%. We've actually seen, this is something in our area, in the DC, Virginia area, we've seen the rise of missing girls. I don't know if you're familiar with this whole thing where there's like a rise of just missing teenage girls. And before, subhanAllah, sadly, you would see masajid saying, looking at the news, just hoping and praying this child isn't Muslim. Well, subhanAllah, now we've begun to see Muslim girls' faces inside of the news. So when we're talking about change, the relevance of the problem is clear. And if we were to look at the different aspects of this problem, some of them are grossly external, international, big crisis, and some of them are actually more right here in our own community, right here inside the Muslim community, right here inside of our masjids, right here. And I would beg to say that even some of this change that needs to happen is inside of our own families. Right? As I looked at, subhanAllah, I'm going to take one particular issue right now. Recently, I was with Rabita on a webcast about spiritual abuse. And there were a total of 7 sessions addressing the different aspects of spiritual abuse. And subhanAllah, the amount of questions led us to the fact that we have to have another session. After a whole entire day, 7 sessions addressing this issue. And subhanAllah, when I began to think about, then how many people are suffering? How many people are actually having spiritual crises? How many people are suffering abuse? How many people are suffering even in silence? And this is what we have to begin to address and say, okay, what kind of change is needed? What kind of change is needed? And subhanAllah, there are some things, that we could say that are just repetitive. Like we're saying it over and over and over again. Do you feel like some of the same messaging, you come to conference after conference, like it's some of the same things. We have Ramadan, after Ramadan, you're in your masjid, he's reciting the same Quran. He's giving the same tafsir. He's giving the same khatara afterwards. But what's happening inside of us? Right? Is there any difference? Is there any movement inside of us? That's the question. Or whether or not the message is falling on deaf ears, but more importantly, is it falling upon a deaf heart? This is the issue. Because we could talk about change, we could detail change, we could write a whole book, we could write volumes on change. And I'm sure if we were to combine all of these conferences together, we'd probably have more than a 6-volume hadith on basically on all the change that we've discussed. If I were to call out to you and say, what are some ways that we could make a difference, that we could be change makers, what would you tell me? Just from what you've heard, what would you tell me? Say it loud. Start within yourself, right? Inna Allah la yughayru. That from the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes it like an emphasis. Inna, anytime he starts the Quran, like inna, like I'm insisting. I am not going to change your condition until you change that which is within yourselves. I'm not going to change it until you change which is in yourselves. So you're going to be walking around like you do around the Kaaba. 7 times you're going to see the same problem. 7 times you're going to see the same issue. 7 times you're going to have to face that person. 7 times you're going to be making the same dua. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is insisting that you dig deeper. That you dig deeper. And that's what these lectures have to be about, is that every time you hear them, they can't just kind of like fall on deaf ears. It has to be like you're digging, right? And when you're digging a little bit, first you move the soil a little bit. Nothing, you don't see any change, but you keep digging, and then wow, you found some silver. You found something of value. Then you dig a little deeper, and then you find some gold. Then you dig a little deeper, and wow, you found some jewels. Then you dig a little deeper, and then you find oil that we can benefit a whole bunch of people. It has to be like that. That as you're listening to the lectures, as their recitation of Quran is falling upon you, it has to be keep digging. Dig. Why? Because Allah says, I'm not going to change it until you change what's in yourself. And anytime we see some of the same trials that we're seeing, Allah is saying, you haven't changed it yet. You haven't changed it yet. And listen to this. Allah is not saying, I will not change your condition until you change your masjid. I will not change your condition until you change your job. I will not change your condition until you change your husband. I will not change your condition until you change your immigration status. He didn't say any of that. He said, I will not change your condition until you change that which is in yourself. So what else did we hear? Okay, I was going to say, yes. To volunteer in the community, right? You've got to dig deep. You got to get in, roll up your sleeves, and be a part of the work, right? You've got to volunteer. Now, when it comes to volunteering, it's a sacrifice. Because the thing about volunteering is that it's time. And times is basically, it is the moments, the hours, the days, the weeks, the months of your life. So basically, you're giving a portion of your life to assist someone else. Now, brothers who are in the room, I want to talk to you for a minute. Because I work with a lot of different organizations, and literally one of the very words that fell out of 2 different directors' mouths said, how do we bring more men and young men back to volunteer in organizations and masajid? I recently did like a poll study, and it turned out like almost 80% of those who volunteer in community organizations are women. So we need our men. I know you're saying, well, we're working. Trust me, these days she's working too. Right? I know you're saying, well, you know, I'm busy. But this is why it's a sacrifice. This is why it takes you first to change your mind. You have to change your mind to say, I don't have time. Make time. You know, I don't have energy. Make the energy. Push yourself. Men and women, push yourself. Well, I don't like those people. Usually that's it. I don't like those people. Well, that's okay. You don't have to like them. It wasn't a requirement. It wasn't a requirement. The requirement is I recognize there is a need and I'm going to lend myself in order to be of benefit. That was the requirement. What else do we hear? Volunteer. So change yourself. Volunteer. What else? Say again. Educate our young population. I'm going to add to that. Educate the young population, the middle-aged population, the old population. We need an education. We need an education. What do I mean by that? This is actually a really sore spot for me. And the reason why I say it's a sore spot is because we have a challenge in our community and this challenge in our community puts us at a very delicate place to be in. We have a tradition that is based upon sound knowledge and sound example. And we are a people who believe in authentication. That whatever it is we follow, that must be rigorously authenticated. And yet, our tradition is a living, breathing tradition. So we are progressively traditional or traditionally progressive. Meaning that we cannot be a community that when we are studying, that we are only studying so we can celebrate those who are in the grave. And feel like, yes, I've done something, I've learned something because I've celebrated and I've acknowledged those who are in the grave. That wasn't the point. You missed the point. The point of looking at those who have passed away, Allah yurhamuhum, was to look at what did they do, to draw an example of what did they do when they were in similar times, but mostly it's about extract the lesson so that you can then apply it to your current day situation. Otherwise, your movement is going to be dead if you're doing it according to those who are already in the grave. You've got to find a way to bring life and energy and a newness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we are not sheep. You've got to find a way for how are you going to understand this to be relevant inside of your condition. Now, so what does that mean between the young people who need to be educated, right, and the elders who need to be educated? The thing about the young people, Allah bless you, I love you, right, is that for the most part, we feel like it all needs to be changed, right? All of it's dead, all of it's irrelevant, and the only thing that's relevant is that which I have come up with, right? So sorry, so sad, that's not the case. As brilliant and as bright as you are, the best generation was the generation of the Prophet ﷺ. And so there is a lot to be learned and there was a lot more accomplished. We're still, it is 2019 in a couple of days. It'll be 2019 in a couple of days. And we are still drawing upon the example of El-Hajj Malik Shabazz and Martin Luther King from the 1960s. A time most of you weren't even born yet. I wasn't even born yet. And yet we're still drawing upon their example. And we're going to talk about why that is in a minute. And then we have elderly who were like basically the good old golden days. The good old, basically you guys didn't do it like we did it. And you know, we were the best. We did it the best. It was the best time. And that's it. And the rest of you are young and dumb. And I'm oversimplifying, but this is one of our challenges. and one is stubborn on one side and the other is stubborn on the other side. And there's not enough communication and growth in working together, but mostly why? Because there's not enough expansion of heart. We're looking at each other. This is the disease that we have to fix inside. We're looking at each other with the eye of criticism, not the eye of and the eye of love and the eye of acceptance, the eye of saying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put you in my life because there's a lesson He wants me to learn from you. And so this is where we have to do the work. How do we take our tradition and move it forward? How do we apply it to the issues of spiritual abuse? The hashtag #MosqueMeToo. And guess what? Putting our head in the sand is very, it's very similar to, I remember every time someone would talk about racism and colorism inside of the Muslim community, they would begin to recite the ayat that Allah Ta'ala created you into nations and tribes so that you may know and love each other, and that there is no racism in Islam. You're right, but there is racism amongst the Muslims. And so we have the same issue when it comes to talking about spiritual abuse and hashtag #MosqueMeToo. We say Islam, we raise up the flag of Khadija and we wave it like crazy, and then we wave up the flag of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, and we talk about how the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam elevated the status of women, but you're not telling me how the Muslims who are present today are elevating the status of women. And so we're trying to stand on the actions of somebody else. We want to basically bury our head in the sand about the reality that sadly, I'm not talking about a few. I'm not talking about, this is a handful. And I would like to believe, right? That because women wear hijab, I would like to believe that makes them immune. I would love that. That makes them immune to sexual assault or sexual harassment. But if we deny these women's experiences, we are just like the Arabs of old. We are literally burying them alive. We're burying them alive under the rubble of denial. We're burying them alive under the dirt of denial. We're burying them alive under the dirt of shame and blame, and basically completely dismissing that even their pain or their trauma exists. You know the problem with that? The problem is that Allah Ta'ala reminds us through the Prophet ﷺ in a Sahih Hadith that says the womb of the woman is connected to the throne of Allah. So if the womb of the woman is connected to the throne of Allah, and that womb is being damaged, abused, mistreated, sexually assaulted, what is going to be your connection with Allah? It's in the rest of this hadith. That whoever connects to me disconnects from Allah. Whoever connects to me connects to Allah. And whoever disconnects from me is disconnected from Allah. This hadith is in Sahih Muslim, volume number 10, 2555. What do I tell you? Because I know you're like, what? What hadith was that? Where she pulled that from? She making that up. And that's related on the authority of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. I mean, we always recited Surah An-Nisa. I stood right here last year saying Surah An-Nisa, ayat 1, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connects, right? Ittaqullahu alladhi tasa'aluna bihi wa arham. That Allah Ta'ala connects having God consciousness, awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, respect for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He connects that with having respect and a reverence for the womb. Now we might think, what do you think? That's only just your mother? Only your mother has a womb? La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. This is about the essence of femininity. And then it gets further described in Surah An-Nisa. But the point is that when we get back to what she's saying, there has to be an education that happens, that what we learned about the Quran, if we understand the Quran as a living, breathing miracle, then what we understand, that what we learned about the Quran, that what we translated about the Quran is not the end of it. It's not the end of its wisdom. It's not the end of its understanding. There's more for us to understand. There's more for us to grow on. There's more for us to uncover. Even if we were just to, can I spend a little minute just talking about that for a minute? Is that okay? How much time? We're good? Okay. She's like, no, you're good, you're good. She's sweet. Allah bless her. I want to go into this ayah just for a little bit. In Surah An-Nisa. الرجال قوامون على النساء. That this verse, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that men are the maintainers, protectors, those who stand up. When we talk about qawamun, and qawamun means to stand up, to rise up. That men are the maintainers and protectors of women and stand up for them. Therefore, they are فَصَالِحَاتِ قَانِتَاتِ لِلْحَافِظَاتِ لِلْغَيْبِ. Right? This is so important because there are 3 steps, actually there are 4 steps that Allah gives in this process. The first one, He talks about that you provide for each other from that which one provides from the other based on how I have granted one over the other. Right? You're familiar with it? Min bifadlillah. And so from this fadl, there is an amana, there is a trust. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has entrusted you with something, and therefore when you are entrusted with something, you have a responsibility for that. So in addressing this particular thing, what's interesting about it is at the beginning of the ayah, Allah is very clear, Ar-Rijalun Qawamun 'ala Nisa, that He very specifically talks about men and women. And yet when He gets to the next part of this, when He talks about that basically He has one, that He has that they will provide for them. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Somebody pull up for me Surah An-Nisa. I want to get the exact word for a second. It's escaping me. Bima fadlullah. That's what I thank you. Bima fadlullah. Thank you. Jazakumullah khairan. This is what I want to talk about. That in this moment when Allah says, because He has given by bifadlillah, by the gift, the giving, the grace, the mercy, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's given one ba'adahum, like He's given one over the other. But right before that, He specifies who's the one over the other. But in this particular section, He doesn't specify one over the other. Some of them over some of them. So who's the sum of them and the sum of them? Well, let's talk about that for a minute. If we have time. We have time? That's okay? Y'all with me? Y'all stay with me? You say, what does it got to do with change? It's important. Just stay with me for a minute. So in giving them, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was allowing the woman to develop the womb, was allowing the woman to develop the ovaries, was allowing the woman to develop tissue and mass that would actually feed people, men were also developing a certain muscle mass, right? And so what she is providing for him, this is a big lesson, it's a big long lesson, but what she is providing for him is multiple things. The external expression of this, and of what's mentioned in the end, the hafidhat lil-ghayb, the external expression of this is motherhood, right? The external expression of this is that she is continuing the lineage. The external, and when she's continuing the lineage, let's go ahead and teach it. Let's take the time. Let's take a minute. Go back to the hadith where it says that the womb of the woman is connected to the throne of Allah. Therefore, men have the responsibility to stand up for her, to guard and protect her. What is He guarding and protecting? The first thing is that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when something comes from the unseen realm into the seen realm, meaning that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to send a provision to the earth, meaning someone who's going to be the next Fortune 500 company, the CEO of that company, the developer of that idea, the one who's going to be the next Omar Suleiman, or someone who's going to be the next Imam Zaid, or someone who's going to be the next leader of the Muslim Women's Organization, or the next Linda Sarsour. Basically, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sending that provision, that wealth, that knowledge, that healing, that mercy to the world, how is he doing that? How is he sending that into the world? That qadr, that meeting between the heaven and the earth, is taking place in the womb of the woman. Right? And so when that occurs, the man has the job to make sure that he's standing up and he's being a bodyguard and a guard, that nothing shall harm. Is it just his wife? This ayat is just about his wife? Right? Because we've been translating it for years that this is about his wife. It doesn't say Zawj. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the term Zawjaha in Surah An-Nisa ayat 1. But in this particular ayat, he doesn't mention the spouse. He says Ar-Rijalun. He's talking about masculinity, manhood. Men stand up for women, that they have a responsibility to be an external guard, because she is an internal guard. She is an internal guard of a spiritual realm. How do I know that it's talking about in spiritual realm? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, as-salihat wal-qanitat lil-hafidhat lil-ghayb. Right? To be salih, that she's amongst those that her deen is sound. And how do you make your deen sound? You only can make your deen sound by knowledge. Right? But in addition to her deen is sound, qanitati, that she's the one who is devoutly obedient. In this case, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about being devoutly obedient to him. That she has a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do we know that? Because when we go back to Surah At-Tahrim, and which is Surah 66, Ayah 12, he mentions our beloved Maryam. He mentions our beloved Maryam, and he describes her as being from amongst the qanitat, that she is amongst those who are devoutly obedient. Does Maryam have a husband? No. So this is not related to her protecting in her husband's absence. This is talking about her being devoutly obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and all of these steps that she honors, and he also honors the amana bifadl, the amana Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him. And then the next step is that they become salih, their deen becomes sound, and from having that knowledge, then they become qanitati, then they have the mental aspect, then they have qanitati, they become devoutly obedient. And then after that, when you become devoutly obedient, you are gifted with the gift of being hafidhati lil ghayb, being a guardian of the unseen. This is what women are talking about when they talk about they have intuition. This is what we're talking about when they're talking about the spirituality of a woman. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about when he's talking about her womb being connected to the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what's important is that we begin to preserve it as it is. So what are the other aspects of this? And these are ways by which you understand, when you deepen your understanding of your value, the value of you are men in this case, and also your value as women in this case, when we can change our mind, when we can change our understanding about the Quran, when we can expand our understanding about the Quran, we can expand our relationship with Allah, allowing us to actually have a transformation and an elevation of the soul. Then we can begin to make a difference in society. Then we are empowered to go out and say, it is my job to take care of these women. It is my job to make sure that they're not sexually harassed. It is my job to make sure that these girls are not ashamed when they are molested, that I will stand up and I will fight for them with every portion in my body. It is my job to not keep it a secret amongst the aunties and the women that this happened. It is my job to make sure that there's a certain healing that happens in the world. Why? Because then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send down his mercy upon the earth. How also do we look at it? When we look at Maryam, when Allah says that she's qanitat, she goes into an institution at that time that's mostly male, right? And her mother, from the beginning, dedicates in her womb, whatever is in my womb, I dedicate to the service of Allah. because her husband was basically the big sheikh at that time, which we know as the Temple of Solomon. And so Maryam's father was the big sheikh, and he passed away while the mother was still pregnant. So then she said, oh Allah, I dedicate that which is in my womb to the service of you. So when she gave birth to Maryam, she said, oh Allah, I've given birth to a female child, because she's saying girls are not allowed to be in service in the community. They're not allowed to be in service in the religious institution. So Allah told her that the male is not like the female. I know full well what you've given birth to, right? And this is about to be something good. Just hold tight. And then, subhanAllah, she becomes a change maker. She becomes technically the first female to enter into a male institution of learning, and she becomes one of the most famous women on earth. Whether you are Muslim or Christian or even other, you know Maryam, the mother of Jesus. You know her. This is big change. And she not only did she change that on just a physical level, but in addition to that, after their abuse of her and not allowing her to study, she would continue to study, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send her the angel Jibreel, right? And there would be food that would be brought to her from heaven, that Allah would produce miracles on her hand. This is huge change in and of itself, because most of us are thinking, you know, there was a debate and the Muslims must not be like other people of other faiths, right? Where we're debating whether or not she is as valuable, when we're debating the concept of he has daraja, does this mean that he is actually better than her, or actually does it mean he has a responsibility over her that she doesn't have over him? But we're debating this issue about her soul and where she ranks. This is not from our deen, and Allah is showing proof of that in the Quran. This is not from our deen. So Maryam becomes a change maker, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then makes her hafidhat, because he gives her a secret. She has a relationship with the angel Jibreel. He gives her a secret, and from that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives her Sayyidina Isa, right? She could have hid it. She could have kept it a secret, but she didn't. She had the responsibility to bring to the community. What time are we at? Ya Allah. Okay, I'm so sorry. Okay. And then when we look at with Asiya, Queen Asiya alayha salam, she was given the responsibility. Allah gave her the amana, right? To hide Sayyidina Musa. And who Musa was and who he was in reality was a matter of the unseen, right? Then when we get to Aisha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Aisha a preserver, hafidhat, a preserver of Islamic law, a preserver of fiqh. When we look at Fatima Zahra, what does she preserve? She preserves Ahlul Bayt. When we look at Khadija radiallahu ta'ala an, Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam was given to her, and by the fact that she never spoke one ugly word, that she was never nasty, ever rude to him, that she was kind, she preserved him and uplifted him, allowing him that when prophecy came, what did she do? She received him with a gentleness and guided him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala entrusted her with the messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam, and she was deserving of that. And she didn't change it. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to preserve the Quran, after the time of Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, he left it in the hands of Hafsa. So when we look at this, he left the pages of the Quran in the hands of Hafsa. He left the recitation of the Quran, the preservation of the tajweed, he left it with Salama. He left his example, his prophetic example, internally in the hands of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. Why am I saying this to you? These are ways that we have to begin. The first change that we have to make is an internal change. Internal change in terms of our understanding of our value, of our relationship. And this is not to say so that it should be so that we can return to an external understanding of Tawheed, so that we can come together to make a difference, to say that we have a collaborative relationship. Right? To say we have a collaborative relationship. I've taken up too much time. I'm so sorry, but I wanted us to understand that even in just this small, looking at this small verse, right? In this one verse of Quran, all the aspects that are connected to it as it relates to our internal change, our internal transformation. We have to begin to be like the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. What did he say? What did the beloved messenger of Allah alayhi salatu wasalam say? He said he was, when Aisha talked about him, she said he was the walking Quran. How do you become the walking Quran? You memorize it? Khalas? No, you be it. You become it. You allow its words and its wisdom to change you. You allow it to just infuse your thoughts and your heart and your soul, so that whatever skill Allah's talent, whatever skill Allah gave you, whatever talent Allah gave you, that is the blueprint of your life. That is the blueprint that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, whatever passion you have, whatever's waking you up at night, if it's about homelessness, if it's about sick children, if it's about the Syrian refugees, if it's about the Mosque Me Too movement, if it's about teaching this deen soundly and correctly, then you have to get on your job, because that's the method of change Allah wants you to use to make the difference. He wants you to be the exact Muslima, Salih, Qanitat. He wants you to be that which He has created you to be. Jazakumullah khairan. Please forgive me. Assalamu alaikum.
Social media is controlling most of our life. How do we make sure we do changes without keep posting everything on social media? When doing work to make change, how do you deal with people amongst us who have ulterior motives, meaning they don't have a strong stance on the issue and are just taking advantage of others? In today's society, Muslim women struggle with the confusion of being open-minded in the workplace of wanting to fit in. Therefore, they lower their standards, values, beliefs, and morals to fit in.
Okay. So there are a couple things as it relates. I'm going to try to Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad. When it comes to social media, it's a delicate balance, and this is actually something I struggle with, because all the time people are saying, Sister Ieasha, please post on Instagram, please post, please go on Facebook Live, and it was just never my, thing to be like, yeah, check us out, we're talking about Allah, like that. Just, it feels weird. And yet at the same time, it's, people want access who aren't in your immediate area. So it is the opportunity to reach a lot of people, and to be a means of a lot of good in a very short time sprint. So this is kind of the benefit of technology. So you have to, of course, you always, just like we did in the beginning, you always have to check your intention. And when you find yourself, those moments when you're like, when you're like, when you have those vain moments, that's different than, when you're trying to do it for khair. That's one thing. The other thing is it's different, like, I'm serving food, right? And as I'm serving food, I'm Snapchatting, serving food to the homeless. Like, it's also like the methodology for how we do things, right? It's different, like, come join us, this is what we're doing today. I don't even need to be in that picture, right? Serving the homeless, I can post it that this is what the masjid is doing, this is what's going on, come join us. I don't need to be in that picture. You know what I mean? Especially like in my cute hijab and like, you just say, man, you want my earring, you saw me. So the other thing is that, sorry. So as it relates to women in the workplace and all of that, the first thing is that you cannot ever control someone else's intentions. You cannot control someone else's behavior. Look at them with a good opinion. Look at them with a good opinion and the eye of mercy, not the eye of criticism, right? They might be actually struggling to wear hijab. So you might be thinking, she's wearing hijab, but she's got on super tight whatever. Like, maybe just the hijab, her being identified as a Muslim, is what she can do. May Allah bless her, may Allah increase her, and really, 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 the only business is it of mine is for me to pray for her, and if she asks me to give her sound advice, but mostly to have a heart of a sister or a good brother, that I love you regardless and that you're valuable, right? I love you regardless and you're valuable. I don't throw you away. I'm not talking about you in the coffee room. I'm not, saying, oh, she thinks she's such a good Muslim. Listen, stop it.
One more.
Okay, one more.
So last question, just hearing all of this, what's one thing that walking out of this room could be a change maker, what's one thing they can walk away with that? And I think we can wrap up after that.
Okay. The first thing is, one thing we can do to be a change maker is that if we look at people, I want us to just do this kind of a body check. You're looking at people with the eye of mercy, the eye of love, and the eye with the belief that even if I thought I saw you doing something wrong, I believe you're going to repent, and I believe 100% you're going to become better than me, than more than I ever imagined you could be. You're Ahlul Jannah. That's why Allah chose to put you the light of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah in your heart. That's the first thing. When I listen to you, I believe you. I'm willing, first of all, to listen to you with a heart of being understanding and a heart of mercy. So if you tell me something has happened to you, if you've entrusted that information, if you're telling me about abuse or you're telling me about your family, even if there's nothing I can do, right? But the fact that I'm willing to listen and to be there for you and hold your hand at that dark time in your life, that is something. Right? That is something. I think most of us are thinking we have to jump out and be like, I have to be a great scholar. I have to be a great activist. I have to be, and sometimes it's just listening to another person. Sometimes it's just being willing to open your heart to another person, right? And if there is something that you can do with your hands to change it, if there is something that you can do, maybe even if it's just this person needs money, or this person needs a place to stay, to crash on the couch, or, you know, if there's, I can pass out flyers, or, you know, I can do a database for, you know, this organization. I can volunteer, you know, some time. I can show up. So with my hands, I can pass out flyers. I can make, you know, if you're a graphic design artist or whatever, however you can use your hands, but it doesn't have to be like, I don't want us to think that you got to build the whole building, that you've got to like come out and, you know, be some, right? Like there were so many great people. When we look at the Sahaba of Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, they were giants because they were ordinary people, right? That's what it was, that they were ordinary people who rose up to extraordinary circumstances. That's, you know, don't think that you've got to be this huge person. So that's what I want us to just walk away with, that be the changes, make sure your eyes are with mercy, your ears are with love, your heart is with compassion, your hand is that which Allah has, you're working with your hands, with what the tools Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, and with your feet, you're just showing up. And you're saying, Ya Allah, labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Ya Allah, here I am at your service. Use me however you see fit.